Hey, what are you doing? I I'm outside. The weather's lovely, and I just want to yap for a second and um, listen. Just listen to this. And if I sound out of breath at some moments, just ignore that. Okay. If you asked me 10 years ago what my biggest weakness was, I probably would have said organization without hesitating. Back then, fresh out of college, I was just trying to make sense of life after school. I was constantly putting together pitch decks and coming up with new ideas and formulas for almost anything. You know, problem solving was always kind of like my thing. It came natural to me. The challenge, though, was obviously not the ideas, right? The challenge was execution, right? Executing was always the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle for me. Most of my solutions pretty much lived in my head or, at best on paper, but rarely made it into reality. Because, of course, that required a completely different skill set, right? Coordination, structure, and follow through, right? Consistently following through. And I don't know, I've just always seen myself as a strategist, someone who thinks, someone who plans, someone who orchestrates how things could realistically be solved. But because I struggled to execute and anchor those strategies in the real world, I never fully saw my ideas as credible skills that I could brag about, right? You know what I mean? They were just really great strategies that I had. So I never felt yeah, this kind of all ties back to the whole follow through thing because they rarely materialized. So I never felt skilled because I didn't have the physical evidence. So over time, I started to blame this on lack of organization. After all, taking something from idea to execution, especially if you care about the final result actually matching your original vision, that requires a really high degree of coordination, motivation, and clarity around the next step, the next best step. So what would often happen, though, is that I didn't know what the next step should be. And that not knowing became overwhelming. And instead of pushing through, it felt easier to kind of move on to the next idea. And I'm sure a medical professional could categorize some of this as an expression of ADHD or an attention-related challenge, but what I've discovered, what I find so fascinating, is that the very idea that I've struggled with the most, organization and execution, is the exact area that I'm now, that I've had to solve for not only myself, but for others, right? It actually became my profession, my gift, essentially, to the world, if that makes any sense, which is actually so crazy to think about. Life has a really funny way of doing that, right? The thing that plagues you the most often becomes the thing you're called to lean into the most. And so that's where my framework comes in, right? I developed a framework that isn't based on brand new ideologies, but on a careful curation of well-established principles in our reality, already woven together into what I like to call a visual symphony or a song. The real purpose of it is to uncover the story underneath the surface, to differentiate the true root signal of things from the symptoms, so that you can clearly identify what steps need to be taken next, instead of kind of being overwhelmed by a mess of options and prescriptions and things like that. So, because that's a real problem, not a lack of advice or action steps, but a lack of the right steps in the right order. That's really important. That's a real problem that deserves a solution. So once I created this framework and I started applying it in my own life, I realized something really surprising. Well, I guess not that surprising. I'm not that surprised. This was me actually executing finally on another idea that I had. So really not that surprised once I was able to push beyond that execution barrier that I have the skill all along anyway. So the framework that I created, it doesn't just solve one specific problem. Well, at least for me, it didn't. It ended up solving all of them. Or I guess a better way to put it is it gave me a way to kind of approach any problem with just greater clarity and structure and confidence, which are these are really powerful tools to have when approaching a new problem. So it's just one of those things that kind of makes more sense when you see it visually, and thankfully the framework is kind of designed to be visual and expressive in that way. So yeah, if you're in the people business, whether that's relationship building, coaching, consulting, mentoring, teaching, or solving problems for individuals, groups, corporations, whatever, right? I really believe that first step of any real transformation should start at this point, in my framework, right? The resources available, and you can explore it on your own, and if you need support, you can always kind of reach out to me. I do one-on-one guidance or, facilitate sessions for you and your team or group or whatever. Typically in those sessions, we walk through an assessment and guided practice so that we can kind of identify all the key components of your situation, like an actual puzzle. So we figure out what the real puzzle pieces that must be on the table are before we decide, like, okay, what's the best next step. I really like gamifying concepts. So yeah, because it's not just about intake questionnaires or generic prescriptions. Like most intake forms are broad and linear. They don't really account for the interconnected nature of your life, your pattern, your context, especially in like an age where AI is everywhere. Gosh, my tool is not AI. It's not a language model or LLM or MLM or whatever. It's a human first framework that takes information from you in a really specific order and format to reveal patterns in your weak points, your strong points, and it highlights areas where you should leverage the most. So it's really effective in that way where it centers the human. So after using it to solve several of my own random problems, I was honestly so impressed by how organized and powerful it was. I was like, oh my god, no way. Like this is one of those moments where like I'm holding the idea, right? Like there's just so much evidence that of the fact that I was able to materialize tangible results from the strategy that I was just like, oh, well, this is one. So yeah, at its core, the framework is about looking at life and any problem from multiple angles. It really empowers you to take at least 4 distinct looks at any given situation, and in multiple directions too. So that makes your understanding like far more comprehensive and detail rich. So like I said, if you're a consultant, for example, and you can use this tool with each client, right? Instead of building one-off, like, I don't know, Canva templates, just to like organize your information, you can like export the data collected to the framework and just instantly have a detailed living profile of that client, along with like a calculator, a roadmap that generates phase-based recommendations tailored to the client. So all of this like happens before AI is even entering the chat, right? Like this is all pre-AI intervention. So that's like the beautiful thing. I really think that in this AI-driven age, finding a way to create a tool that's human-centric, it's like we went from, inventing the wheel to, just look where technology is now. So it almost needs to go back in the other direction a little bit, or at least find some sort of balance so the human aspect doesn't get left behind. And yeah, just finding ways to integrate that, I think, is just holistic in nature. It means like the human component, right? That nuance, the story, the context is like fully honored and understood. So, then whenever you decide to bring in the technological assistance, you're doing it from a place of clarity, alignment, and intention. So as a consultant or a coach or a mentor or teacher, whatever you want to call me, or whoever you are, right? This gives a pure human-centered like baseline to work from. And I think that's where the most meaningful change begins. So, yeah.